We build these incredibly complex systems, right? Things like global politics or even just our local towns. And we think they're rock solid. But what if I told you they're often balanced on a knife's edge? Just one tiny decision, one single moment, away from complete and total collapse. Yeah, let's get into it. Just imagine it. You're deep under the ocean. You hear your captain say that, and you've got your finger on a button that could literally end the world. I mean, that's not some movie scene. That was the reality for one man during the most dangerous day of the Cold War. So it really makes you wonder, right? How close can a system get to just failing completely? We're going to explore that exact question today by looking at 3 incredible stories. We've got a submarine that almost kicked off World War III, a world in a bubble that basically suffocated itself, and a small town that was completely bled dry by the one person they trusted most.
All right, first up, we're going back to a time of insane global tension, a moment when the fate of, and I'm not exaggerating here, all of humanity rested on the shoulders of a single Soviet naval officer.
Okay, so the year is 1962. We're right in the thick of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The US and the Soviet Union are staring each other down in a full-blown nuclear standoff. American warships have thrown a blockade around Cuba, trying to stop Soviet ships. The entire world is just holding its breath. But you know where the tension was the highest? Deep, deep down in the Caribbean Sea. Because down there, inside the Soviet submarine, B-59, conditions were, well, they were hellish. They had been completely cut off from Moscow for days, trapped in these super hot tropical waters with no air conditioning. The heat was just unbearable, pushing 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen was getting dangerously low, their batteries were dying, and to top it all off, they were surrounded by 11 American destroyers. The crew was exhausted, terrified, and utterly isolated. And then, explosions. See, the U.S. Navy was dropping these small, practice depth charges. Their goal wasn't to destroy the sub. It was just to send a signal to try and force them to surface. But the crew of B-59, they had no way of knowing that. In that isolated, high-stress pressure cooker of a submarine, they thought one thing and one thing only. World War III had just started. Convinced he was under attack, Captain Savitsky gave the order, "We will sink them all." He ordered the launch of their nuclear torpedo. The political officer on board? He agreed. But here's the thing. Launching required unanimous consent from 3 senior officers. The third man, Vasily Arkhipov, was the only one who pumped the brake. And what makes Archipov's decision so incredible is his backstory. Just 1 year before this, he had personally witnessed the absolute horror of a nuclear accident on another sub, the K-19, where crewmen died from horrible radiation poisoning. He knew better than maybe anyone else on that boat that a nuclear decision, once you make it, you can't take it back. He argued calmly, he vetoed the launch, and he eventually convinced the captain to surface. One man's past trauma saved the entire world's future. So from a system that was saved by human judgment, we're going to pivot to one that was brought down by its own unexpected flaws. Back in 1991, this really audacious experiment kicked off in the Arizona desert. It was called Biosphere 2. The idea was to seal 8 people inside this massive glass dome for 2 years straight. It was supposed to be this perfect, self-sustaining copy of Earth, a potential blueprint for colonies on Mars. But the reality turned out to be a far cry from that utopian dream. The system started to fail almost right away, and in ways nobody saw coming. The desert biome turned into a swamp because of condensation. The bees that were supposed to pollinate the crops all died, while pests like cockroaches, they loved it and multiplied like crazy. And, maybe most critically, something was seriously wrong with the air itself. When they sealed the doors, the atmosphere inside was just like ours out here, about 21% oxygen. Totally normal, totally breathable. But in just a few months, that number dropped like a rock to a dangerously low 14.5%. That's like trying to live at the top of a 13,000-foot mountain. The crew was exhausted all the time, they started suffering from sleep apnea, their bodies were literally struggling just to function. The world they had built to keep them alive was actually suffocating them. And what happened here is a perfect example of something called a cascade failure. It turned out the soil was unexpectedly full of microbes that were just gobbling up oxygen way faster than the plants could make it. This led to the crops failing, which led to the crew being hungry all the time, which of course added to all this psychological stress. One tiny, unforeseen detail created this domino effect that brought the entire, perfectly designed system to its knees. So for our last story, we're going to see how the weakest link isn't always some technical glitch or a misunderstanding. Sometimes it's something much simpler: human greed. This is the story of Rita Crundwell and the city of Dixon, Illinois.
For decades, Rita Crundwell was the city controller of Dixon. Everybody trusted her. She was seen as this quiet, reliable public servant, earning a pretty normal salary of about $80,000 a year.
But over the course of 22 years, she secretly stole almost $54 million from that small town. And this wasn't some complex cyber heist. No, this was a slow, methodical bleed, made possible by a system that put way too much trust in one single person.
Her method was actually deceptively simple. She opened a secret bank account with a name that sounded super official. Then she'd write checks from the city's real accounts, making it look like they were for legitimate state projects, but she'd deposit them right into her secret one. And because she controlled everything, all the mail, all the financial statements, nobody ever checked up on her. The system itself wasn't broken. It was just being driven by a thief. And here's the really devastating part. While Rita was off building this massive championship horse breeding empire and living this life of incredible luxury, she was telling the Dixon Police Department that they couldn't afford new patrol cars. She told the public works guys there was no money to fix the roads. She completely exploited the town's trust to fund her lifestyle, and the entire community was the one who paid the price. So what do these three stories, a submarine, a bubble, and a small town, really tell us? Well, they show that every single system, no matter how well designed or how complex it seems, has a tipping point. Let's break it down. With a submarine, the whole system of nuclear war was nearly broken by a simple misunderstanding, but it was saved by one person's judgment. In Biosphere 2, this beautiful, closed ecological system just collapsed under the weight of its own hidden complexity. And in Dixon, a system of civic and financial trust was exploited for decades, all because of one person's unchecked greed.
You know, it's an old saying, but these stories really prove it in the most dramatic way possible. It doesn't matter if it's a single person, a flawed assumption, or a process nobody's watching, the vulnerability is always there. The entire structure really does depend on its most fragile part. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. From the global financial markets, to the way we get our food, to just the social trust we have in our own neighborhoods. What are the hidden vulnerabilities that we're not seeing? And maybe more importantly, will we be able to spot them before they break?